Good morning and welcome to the first in our family law webinar series with DMH Stallard. My name is Samantha Jago and I'm a family solicitor and partner with DMH Stallard in the family team. As stated, this is the first in our family law webinar series, and we have two further webinars following this month addressing how the pandemic has affected domestic abuse and the rise of that, as well as financial matters. Today we are focusing on how the pandemic has affected children and parents. And we have two very exciting speakers today for you. We have James Evans from Our Family Wizard, and we also have Hannah McSorley from Guildford Chambers. I'll give you a little bit more information about them in a minute. The length of the webinar today should be approximately 1 hour, and each speaker will be talking to you for about 10 to 15 minutes. There is an opportunity throughout the webinar for you to raise questions, so please do submit them online and we will do our best to answer them at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded, so if you want to sit back and relax and not take notes, then you can go to our website at a later date and watch the video again. In addition, the slides will also be published on our website. With reference to the questions that we aren't able to answer, we will try to come back to you individually, or we will publish some brief replies on our website if you are happy for those replies to be made public. So without further ado, I'll just give you a little bit more background information about your speakers today. The purpose of this webinar series is not just aimed at practitioners in family law, but also the general public, anybody that these sorts of issues might affect. So that could be if you're going through a personal issue in your life and you need further information and a starting point to steer, but also if you have any dealings at all with family law, so you might work at a contact centre or a CAB, and you just want to get a better steer as to how you might manage situations and your clients. So I'm your first speaker today, and my name, as I said, is Samantha Jago, and I'm a family law partner and mediator with DMH Stallard. I joined in October last year and I absolutely love the firm. Great lawyers, really strong lawyer base here. I'm based in the Guildford office, but we do have offices across the south, and we can help you in any of those offices. And as I say, we've got a very strong team of family lawyers. The next speaker you have after me is James Evans. Now, I came across James Evans when I was at a family law seminar, and he gave a brief talk about a brilliant app or online application that he has that is available to parents. So this is called Our Family Wizard, and it is an app that helps parents try to improve their communication. And we will, if you're a practitioner or if you're a parent, you'll realise that it can be very difficult for parents to cooperate and communicate in a constructive fashion. And Our Family Wizard really works hard to achieve that. It's very easy to use and it's cost effective. And a lot of courts now are insisting that people at least try this, or they're putting them into court orders for parents to use. And I really do recommend it. I've used it a lot in my cases, and I've really found that it's helped tone things down between parents. We also have then, finally, to finish us off, the brilliant Hannah McSorley. She's got over a decade of experience, and she is a family law barrister with Guildford Chambers. And she'll be talking to us about the impact that the pandemic has had upon the court's ability to deal with children matters and the effect of that. And as I say, once we have all spoken, there is an opportunity for you to raise questions with us. So please do raise any questions as you go through. In addition, I'll be asking some questions, so there's an opportunity for you to interact with this webinar and to see what you think about how families are made up across the UK today. So without further ado, I'm going to go on to my part of the seminar, which is looking at what issues have I come across as a practitioner that involve children during the pandemic. So one of the common issues that I have come across is that some people are using the pandemic, or some parents are using the pandemic as a reason to suspend or block contact. Well, what can you do? Well, we as practitioners always encourage parents to try to work together to resolve any issues that flow from their separation. So the first port of call, and I do appreciate it's very difficult, is to try to talk to your former partner and see if you can come to a common consensus. If the two of you can't, then you can speak to a solicitor and ask them to write to your former partner and remind them of their obligations, and to see if you can reach a common agreement and re-establish contact. Further, you might want to go to mediation, where an impartial third party, a trained mediator, not to be confused with a counsellor, can meet with you both and try to open up a dialogue between you so that you can reach a common consensus. Apologies if I just dipped out there, my internet connection went down momentarily. So you could go to mediation, and as I say, you could see if a mediator would be able to assist you in reaching a resolution. There are other means that you could try to resolve matters such as arbitration or roundtable meetings, but really a last resort is that either one of you could make an application to the court to resolve the issue. But what the government guidance have given us is that they have said that contact should not be suspended or blocked due to the pandemic. So you should really try to continue to facilitate contact despite the fact that the pandemic is with us. So what happens if you or your child are displaying symptoms of the pandemic? What can you do? Well, what we would say is, well, this is just my professional opinion, is that you should self-isolate in line with the government guidelines. So you should explain to your former partner that you are suffering from the symptoms of the pandemic, or that your child is, and that as a result, it's best to err on the side of caution and to self-isolate. What I would say is that if you do have to do that, is that you should endeavour to maintain a relationship between the child and the other parent during that lockdown period. And this can be achieved via Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp, telephone, and so forth. But to try to maintain that contact. And also, it's often very helpful to say that you'll try to make up any lost time. I know that can be very difficult, but if you can, that can show that it's not that you're trying to block or resist contact, but rather you're trying to act in the best interests of the whole household by following the lockdown rules. What happens if you have a partner who just ignores that and says, well, nevertheless, I want to see the child? Well, you could make an application to the court and see what the court do. The court might consider it quite reasonable for you to say, well, actually, we've got these, I'm a vulnerable person, or I've got symptoms. And they might say, well, yes, contact shouldn't go ahead. Or they might say, despite that, it should go ahead. If you don't want to go to court, because obviously that, as I say, is a last resort, and mediation or other forms are not working, then you can try to agree matters directly with the parent. So if we move on to what happens if you live abroad and you normally spend time with your child, then what I would say is this, is that we have quarantine measures in place which we should follow. So, for example, if you're travelling to this country and you come from a country that has quarantine measures, then you should follow those. And that might mean that you have to be in quarantine for 14 days before you can see your child. If your child normally comes to your country, so you're outside of the UK to spend time with you, again, they will need to follow the quarantine guidelines with you, but they may also have to follow the quarantine guidelines when they come back to this country. That might be very disruptive for the child because it might interrupt with their schooling. So have a think about whether or not it's in the best interest of the child to have that disruption if they're coming to the country you're in and coming back. And it might be that you have to facilitate alternative means of contact, as I've suggested above, such as FaceTime and so forth, as a means of facilitating contact during the pandemic. What happens if you want to go on holiday? A lot of people are very ground down with the pandemic and just wants to get away. Can you just simply go and take you and your child on holiday without the other parent's permission? Well, what you should do, the starting point is that you should ask everybody with parental responsibility if you can go abroad with your child. Now, every mother automatically has parental responsibility, and most fathers now have it. So ideally, you should ask everybody with parental responsibility for permission before you take your child out of the UK. The only exception to this is if there is a court order in place that provides you with a living with order. So this used to be called custody, so where you are recognised as the primary carer. And that does mean that you can go abroad for a period of up to 4 weeks with your child without the other parent's permission. However, I would suggest to you that you always get the other parent's permission if you can, because if you don't, you could find yourself in quite serious trouble because they might make an application to the court to claim abduction, to prevent the holiday and so forth. So if you can get permission from the other parent, do, and if they are really against it, you should consider making an application to the court for their permission so that you can go on holiday. So moving on to my next slide, this finishes off the common issues that we have found that we are dealing with as family practitioners. I'm finding it hard to communicate with my former partner regarding making arrangements for our children during lockdown. What can I do? Well, you will have a talk in a moment from James Evans, who will talk to you about Our Family Wizard, which is an online app which is actually very helpful in getting parents to think about the words that they use when they speak to each other, putting in place timetables and trying to work in a very sort of child-centric way together. Further, I've already mentioned it, I think that mediation is a very useful tool for separated parents. It really does encourage parents to have a dialogue with one another and to reach common decisions regarding their children. You run the risk, if you go to court, that a judge will inflict upon you an order or an arrangement that neither of you actually think are in the best interest of your children. And further, by applying to the court, you will surely worsen your relationship and your communication with your former partner. So I would suggest look up the online apps. They're there to support you, such as Our Family Wizard, and really do consider mediation. If you don't want to go to mediation, then you can always sit around a table with you and your lawyer and them and their lawyer and try to reach a common consensus. So what options are there if face-to-face contact is normally supervised? Well, a lot of contact centres are now reopening. So what I would suggest is contact those contact centres that are local to where the child resides, find out if they're opening, find out if they're operating and how they're operating, when they're available, the cost, and so forth. If you normally have a third party that supervises the contact, but they have to self-isolate in line with the government guidelines, then I would suggest trying to find a suitable alternative, not somebody inflammatory that you know will simply upset your partner, former partner, by suggesting, but somebody that is neutral so that the child can really enjoy their time with their other parent. This is a common, and it's the last point on this slide, but a common concern that parents come to us, whether there's a pandemic or not, is the quality of care that the other parent can provide to the child. Now, what I would always say is that contact should go ahead if it can. Only if a child is going to be placed in a position of potential neglect or harm should you stop contact or suspend it. And I mean by that serious harm and neglect. If your former partner, it just might give them the occasional fast food or their bedtime routine might slip, I wouldn't say that that's necessary grounds to suspend contact. I would suggest that whilst you can say these routines work for the child, we have to accept that both parents will offer a positive aspect of their personality to their child, and there will also be some negative things on both sides. So it's about recognising and respecting that you will have different parenting styles. If, as I say, that you are concerned that your former partner will just simply neglect the child, then you can suspend contact. But in the same way that if you stop contact because of the pandemic, the parent can make an application to court to reinstate it and spend time with the child. So just be aware that that is a remedy available to them if you stop contact. So moving on from that, the additional issues that we have seen arise sadly during this pandemic is domestic abuse. Now, domestic abuse isn't just somebody hitting somebody else. Domestic abuse covers a wide spectrum of issues, such as emotional abuse, financial control, sexual abuse, coercive control, gaslighting, and so forth. And often these forms of domestic abuse are quite difficult to identify, and they often represent the slow build-up and erosion of somebody's self-esteem and feelings of worth and cutting them off. Now, we do have a seminar coming up soon which will be addressing this webinar, and we have Surrey Police speaking on this, and we also have a local charity speaking on this about what they can offer as well as a family lawyer can offer. So I don't want to go into too much detail at this time, but the central message is this: you do not need to put up with domestic abuse. You can make an application to court for an injunction to stop the unwanted behaviour and potentially to have the perpetrator removed from the property. And if you are frightened in the moment, you should contact the police. So if you feel immediately threatened, contact the police. They're very sympathetic and they're very well trained. And don't be put off contacting a family lawyer. We are here to help, and we want to help you, and we can help protect you and your family. The other issue we have come across is with grandparents and the wider family spending time with children during the pandemic. Many of them have been told that they must self-isolate. But in exactly the same way as if you have to suspend contact between a child and their parent, you should do what you can to continue to facilitate contact despite the fact they cannot meet face-to-face. So by way of example, you should try to make sure that it can be available by FaceTime, by telephone, maybe sending your postcard and so forth. If a grandparent is not able to provide childcare, then I'm afraid that you will have to find alternatives until such time as the pandemic, lockdown and further rules have been relaxed. Okay, so moving away from that topic, I thought that'd be interesting. Well, we have a summary of the main points there on the further slide, but I've gone through them in quite a lot of detail. The slides are on our website, so you can access them. So moving on from that, I thought it'd be helpful for us to really say, well, how are our families being made up in the UK now? Because as practitioners, I can say that I'm dealing with an awful lot of lone parent families and dealing with a lot of cohabiting families and blended families, and that's now forming a large part of the work we do. So I had a look at this and I thought, well, now which city in the UK is the highest percentage of lone parent families? So I would encourage you all to vote, and which I'm doing now, and to see what you think about this. So I'll just give you a moment to cast your vote if you can. Don't worry if you can't. So the answer is London. So London has the highest percentage of lone parent families. And actually, it's interesting because I've just had the results in for this. So a lot of you thought London, but a lot of you thought Birmingham and Liverpool. So it's interesting to see and to have a think about where lone parents are. I think this is an important issue to address because, as I say, families are being made up in very different ways now. And from my perspective as a family practitioner, cohabiting couples or separated lone couples will not have as many rights. So we need to address the fact that there is a changing makeup of families across the UK. So on to the next poll question. Which city has the largest percentage of 2 or more unrelated adults in 2019? So I'm just voting myself. And by that, that means whether you are cohabiting or whether you've got stepchildren or step-parents in your families and so forth. And again, as I say, I think that there is a very big rise now in blended families. So it's interesting to have a look at this. So if you want to just take a moment to think about that and cast your vote, if you can. If you can't, don't worry, I'll show you the results. So moving on from that, the answer is London. According to, and actually interesting, most of you did think that this would be London, so most of you were right. According to the Office for National Statistics, we see that that is the fastest growing type of household over the last 2 decades. And I actually think that we are probably representing more and more cohabiting couples. And as I say, the law really hasn't kept up with that. And in particular, providing financial support to parents who are separated but weren't married is a particular concern for practitioners. So moving on to the final slide in this, in my presentation, and also the last poll question, which country has the highest percentage of married and civil partnership couples and the lowest percentage of cohabiting couples in 2019? So if you want to take the time to cast your vote, which I'm doing, so I'll just give you a moment to think about that. And the answer is, drum roll, Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland has the highest percentage of married couples and the lowest percentage of cohabiting couples. And actually, you closely tie between England and Wales within that. So that brings me to the end of my part of the seminar. And as I say, the next speaker is James Evans, who I will hand over to now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you ever so much, Samantha, and thank you very much to DMH Stallard for inviting me to speak today. Just as a brief introduction, for those of you who don't know, our Family Wizard, as Samantha described, is a co-parenting communication app. It is a place for parents to communicate through during, after, before the divorce separation process. Now, the program's actually been around for nearly 20 years. It started out in Minneapolis in America in 2001. And in its 20 years of existence, our Family Wizard has been court-ordered in all 50 states of America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. We built a UK separate version, a UK entity, about 4.5 years ago. And in that time, our Family Wizard has been court-ordered in all the major cities of the UK, Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, and we're being seen to be ordered every week in some way or another. So the program is growing and really is firmly here within the UK. And if we move on to our next slide, I'm going to be giving you a very quick whistle-stop tour of how our Family Wizard looks and works for both the parents and the professionals. We have all these features that you can see here. If you click through, Amber, you'll be able to see that we can jump to any of these features. This is available on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad, anything with access to the internet. On our next slide, you'll see how this would look for the families. This is the home page for the parents once they have subscribed and they have logged in. If you click through, Amber, we'll see a little key and a little family on the left there. So we have a demo family, if you like, for the sake of this presentation. We have Emma in purple, we'll say that's mum. Sam in blue, we'll say that's dad. Now, they're the only people who are paying to use our Family Wizard. A subscription costs £79 per parent per year. They pay once at the start of the year, and then it is an annual resubscription. However, if the parents can't afford that subscription fee for whatever reason, if you do pro bono work, if they're on government benefits, welfare, legal aid, some sort of financial hardship, then they can get our Family Wizard for free. On our website, we have something called a financial hardship application form, where either you or the parents can apply for these free accounts and they can get them no questions asked. So you only pay if you can. We also have Neil in green that you can see there on the left as well. Neil is the child in this family. The child can have an account. It's optional. They don't have to. But if they want to, they can have an account with very limited access. The child can only send and receive messages to parents that they have been given access to, and they can only see events in the calendar that are in relation to them. So who's picking them up from school, who's dropping them off, that kind of thing. That's it. The child cannot see what the parents are saying to each other. They can't see the money going back and forth. It is there because, you know, realistically, we have 10-year-old children who are better on their phones than us at the moment. If technology is going to be included in some way, we think the child should be able to as well, but in a safe, monitored, filtered format. We also have Tula in orange that you can see there. Now, Tula is what's called a third-party account. Again, these are free. They have the same reduced access as a child, and this could be anyone involved in the family scenario. So this could be grandma, dog walker, babysitter, nanny, new girlfriend, guardian. If they're involved in the child's life in some way and they need to have access, they can, again, in that reduced safe access. If we click through, you'll be able to see the notification center, which appears on the homepage. Now, notifications can be personalized in a variety of different ways. Most people will have the app on their phone, but they'll choose to have drop-down notifications. The difference with our Family Wizard is if a parent gets a notification and they go, I'm not sure I want to read that message right now, or I don't know if I want to see that message, they can swipe left, click on clear, out of sight, out of mind. With our Family Wizard, they are immediately reminded of any active notifications straight away on the homepage. It's the first thing they'll see. So they can't say, oh, I didn't know I had that message, or I forgot I had that notification. They're told straight away on the homepage, you have 4 unread messages. Now, the only way to remove that notification from the homepage is to actually read the message. You could see under the names from our previous slide that there was timestamping, so we will see when the parents have last logged in and when they will see these notifications. If you click through, you'll see that you can download this on any format. Basically, if they have access to the internet, they can use our Family Wizard. Our next slide is the first of our features, and this is the message board. Now, we like to think of our message board as a slightly more informal version of email, but a familiar format when sending those messages is necessary. The main difference from email is the timestamping, and if you click through, we'll highlight that for you. So you can see here when this message was first viewed, on what date, at what time, and who first sent it, who sent that message on what date at what time. Those timestamps, they can't be edited, they can't be deleted, they can't be changed. That will always be true, it will always be accurate. If you click through, you can see what it looks like when you are writing a message. Now, when you're writing a message, it looks like this, and this is one of our unique features to our Family Wizard. It is called Tone Meter. Tone meter is like a spell check for your emotions. So if you are writing a message and any inflammatory or offensive language is written, Tone meter will flag that and let the writer know. So if you click through, we have some examples. So let's say, for example, a parent was writing a message, I know you'll say it's not your fault. Tone meter would flag that and say, this could be deemed as aggressive by a recipient parent. Now, the recipient parent does not then receive a notification saying you've received an aggressive message. It doesn't stop the sender from sending it. They can still send it if they want to, and it doesn't offer them an alternative phrase to change it into something else. It just gives them an initial opportunity to think about what they've written before then choosing to send it. Tone Meter is unique to our Family Wizard. We own the technology and we have seen it help a lot of families along the way. It is a really clever and helpful tool. And if you click through, you can see what it looks like if we wanted to make a report of this information. Now, we have access to reporting for both professionals and for parents. So if you're listening and you're a professional and you want to make bundles, you want to make reports, you can do this through our Family Wizard. These are free. You can make these at any time. There is no limit on the amount of these. And these are clear, accurate reports of any activity that happens on any of our features. The example we have up here for the messages, we have clearly first views, what time, who sent it, and it will say at the top who created this report. So it is always true of a certain date and time. On to our next feature and our next slide, which is the calendar. If you click through these for me, you'll be able to see how the parents are all color-coded and correspond to the days. And if you click through, you can get a more detailed breakdown of what's going on each day. Now, at the top left there, you can see the color-coded blocks. Those correspond to the overnight stays for the month. So if you needed to quickly count the overnights for the months, you could do so there. And then as you can see, you have a more detailed breakdown of what's going on each day through the main body of the calendar. If you click through, you can see what our parenting schedule setup looks like. Now, this is in place for the parents when they first subscribe, and there is a lot of flexibility of how this works. But of course, every case is different and all the clients have different needs. So you can see here, the example we have is a 2255 with an interval of 2 weeks. Perhaps your clients know how long they want this parenting schedule to be, and they can put this in for 2 months, 2 years, whatever works best for them. That then goes into the calendar as a backbone of those colors where they can then make further amendments if they need to. If you go on to our next slide, you'll see our time swap feature. So as I said, if you need to make smaller changes to that schedule, you can do so through this trade request feature. If you click through for me, you can see that the first thing you can see is that these requests have to be at least 48 hours before the event happens so that the parent has time to see it and respond. And they have a little note there about what this is. If you click through, you can then see the information about this event. When does it start? When does it end? And which parent is taking responsibility of the child? If you click through again, you can see if there is an alternative time being offered. So let's say, for example, the one parent wants to spend time with the child on Saturday, and they're saying, okay, if you spend time with the child on Saturday, I could spend time with the child after school Tuesday. That's essentially what we're doing here. If you click through, you'll see what the parents will see as a response. So if you click through again, we can see those 3 options. So the parent will receive this. If they approve, then that will automatically change all the colors in the calendar for them. They don't have to manually go through and do it themselves. If they click refuse, we will keep a record of that in the system. So if they keep refusing all these event requests or all these schedules, we will keep a record of it in the system. We will know if one parent is refusing and you will be able to access that. Or refuse and make an offer, which is saying, yes, I'm fine for you to take the child on Saturday as you suggested, but I can't do after school Tuesday. Could you do after school Thursday? Once approved, everything will be changed in that calendar. On to our next slide and our next feature, which is the journal. Now it says newly redesigned here, and that is in light of what is going on with lockdown and COVID and everything we are all experiencing this year. So we've introduced a couple of features. One of these is Moments that you can see here. Now Moments works as an isolated social media for the family involved in that account. So the example we have here, mum has gone for a walk with grandma and the child, and she wants to upload some pictures. Great. Now, when mum uploads those pictures, she will choose who can and who cannot see those pictures. It is completely up to mum. So she could choose to share them with just dad, just grandma, just the child. She could share it with all of them, or indeed she could share it with none of them and just have it there for her own personal record. If you move on to our next feature in the journal, this is the check-ins. Now we're seeing this used all the time at the moment with lockdown. This is a place to geotag your location. So if you need to physically be in a specific location at a specific time, you can essentially prove you were there within this feature. So you would go to the journal within our Family Wizard, you would drop a pin in the map of your precise location, and it will timestamp it within our Family Wizard. Now the parent has to physically be there. They can't be at home and then move the pin to somewhere where they're not. They have to be there. And this does not then open a tracking system. You can't then see the parent's map 3 days later. It essentially takes a screenshot. It is a GDPR compliant system, and we are seeing it used all the time at the moment. If you move on to our next feature, this is the info bank, and this is where you can store vital information about the family. If you click through, you'll see our first of these features, which is Family Vitals. This is an example of where to store that crucial information about the family. Shoe size, shirt size, blood type, really important information that the family needs to be able to share and needs to be able to communicate about, but in that safe, neutral zone. If you click through again, you'll see another of these features, which is health. Of course, health is absolutely crucial at the moment, is the #1 priority for all families. So this is a place to store that information. Medication, allergies, prescriptions. They can even track what they're doing and their movements in terms of their health. So this is really being used a lot at the moment. There is also a space within InfoBank called My Files, where you can store physical documents within the system. Things like school reports, photos that the child has drawn, they can be stored there as well. The next of our features is the expense log, and this is a place to track and pay back reimbursements made towards the child. Again, it's color coded, so you know that in this example, purple is one of mum's payments, blue is one of dad's, and if you click through, you can see at the bottom that we automatically accumulate all those funds, so they don't have to go through and add it all up for them. So if you were to click through, you can see one of our forms, and this is essentially what our parents do within our Family Wizard. So the example we have there, it's a request for a reimbursement because one parent has paid for guitar lessons, they've paid the full amount, they are requesting half of that because that's what they've agreed. That 50/50 is just an example category, you can change that. The date of the purchase and a receipt. If you click through, you can see how easy it is to upload a receipt. You can take a photo or choose an existing. If you click through again, you can see how you can take a photo. Those receipts will then all automatically get stored in the My File section of the information bank, so they don't have to go on and manually add it themselves. So if you click through again, we can move on to our practitioner accounts. So what you've just seen is the family side and how the parents would look and use using our Family Wizard. This is the professional access. Now, this is what you as listeners can use. It is free. You will never have to pay to use your professional account. It is also optional. So if you want to say to your parents, we recommend our Family Wizard, off you go and use it, you're more than welcome to do so. But there are some really great benefits of doing a professional account if you think it's appropriate. So if you click through, we can show you what this looks like once you are logged in. You can have as many cases as you like on your one account. That's great. It means you don't need a different password for each family you work with. You also have the option to add a client on the right there. So if you click through, we can show you what this looks like. So there's two options here. You can create a new family, meaning if they are saying, yes, I'd like to subscribe, you can get the ball rolling for them, or you can link to an existing family, meaning a family may have been subscribed to our Family Wizard for 2 or 3 months, and they say to you, this is going really well, we'd like you to make a report, and then you'd like to link through. Once you do this, if you click through for me, you'll be able to go into what is called client view mode. Now, if you just click through these next few quite quickly, you can essentially, when you're in client view mode, you can see absolutely everything the same as what your client can see, but the difference is you are not interfering with any of the data. Meaning you're not changing the timestamping, you're not changing the last time anything was read, you're in a ghost mode, if you like, a bird's eye view, but it allows you to see everything the same as what your client can see, making those reports completely at your discretion. We have a fully dedicated customer support team. I'm sure you're all sitting here thinking, this is all well and good, but how do my clients learn about it? Our website is full of useful videos and information. If you email me, I can set up tutorials for you and your firm, but your clients are welcome to call customer support anytime. It's a free number. They can help them with setup, with their accounts. They can also email if they have any questions. And if you click through for me onto my last slide, we also have an offer of a complimentary first family. Now, this is available to each of you as individuals, not just your firm. Every single one of you listening is entitled to a complimentary first family. This is a way for you to see the benefits of our Family Wizard and to try it out with one of your families. So if you're sitting there thinking, I actually have 4 or 5 families this might be useful for, our advice is to try it with the family who are struggling the most with communication. You'll see the biggest benefit there. That's my email address that you can see on screen. Email me anytime and I can help you set this up. This offer is available anytime, so if the appropriate family doesn't appear for 4 or 5 months, that's absolutely fine. Contact me anytime. And also, please do email me if you've got further questions, if you'd like a full tutorial for yourself and your team, if you like any of our information or any of our documents. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to pass it over now to Hannah and her talk. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for that, James. That was really fascinating. I'm sure that certainly I and probably most of the practitioners listening know a few families who could benefit from the tonometer. That sounds really interesting. So thank you for that talk. And thank you very much to Samantha and DMH Stallard for inviting me to take part today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hannah McSorley. I am a barrister practicing in family law at Guildford Chambers. And the purpose of my my talk today is just going to be quite a short view from the family courts of the pandemic and the impact that has had on the family justice system that we as practitioners interact with every day. And to some extent it's a constantly changing landscape out there, as you all know. So I'll move on to the first slide, and really the question I'm seeking to answer here is what can clients expect when they take their cases to court in these circumstances, and how will the court determine their applications? It's an obvious point to many practitioners, but I know that this webinar is open to anybody who's interested. There have been huge challenges faced by the courts by the pandemic. Like the rest of society, it hit the family justice system with very significant force, and there has been a constant challenge to balance the need of children to have swift decisions which are not unduly delayed, and the right that parents and parties have to have a fair trial. So achieving justice in these circumstances has been a colossal struggle for the system. The system was already overloaded before the pandemic even started. And the practitioners here will know that during the end of March and all of April and much of May, most final hearings were adjourned, many fact-finding hearings were adjourned, and so there's an enormous backlog in the system. So those parties who come to court with their conflict are walking into a very difficult system even now. As Samantha addressed in her talk, that of course the pandemic restrictions played havoc with the arrangements that separated parents and families have reached in relation to their children. The government guidance was quite clear from quite early on that absent specific quarantine requirements, the pandemic restrictions should not prevent children from having contact with their parents, provided that contact doesn't otherwise fall foul of the restrictions. Because of the short period of the lockdown, I know it may have felt very long, but in legal terms it was a short period. We don't have published case law from the private law children arena. We do have some interesting cases that have emerged from the public law arena. So cases where parents and local authorities are in conflict in relation to a child. Because of the urgent nature of those kind of applications, we've had a series of cases that have sort of hanging on the coattails of one another come to the Court of Appeal. And I've made a reference to 3 of those cases, Re-P, Re-A, Re-Q. There's also Re-B, which is interesting. And without going into the detail here, those cases have really been concerned with when it's appropriate to have a remote hearing and how it's appropriate to deal with situations where that is not fair. The thing to remember, and the wider application of those cases to the private law arena, is that the decision in relation to how a court hearing is conducted is a case management decision in the hands of the judge, in the hands of the individual judge. There are circumstances where a remote hearing will not be appropriate. One factor, but not necessarily a determinative factor, is the seriousness of the decision that is being taken. But that is by no means a sort of ace card. The really important thing is for the judge to look at the individual case and the individual challenges arising from that case. So where you have, for example, parents who for some reason or another, whether that be reasons of understanding or technology. If those people may struggle to properly engage with a hearing, then there may be an argument that they should attend. If it is a hearing where evidence is to be heard and that the judge considers that the demeanour of the witnesses are important, that's another factor. So as practitioners, we're looking out for these factors and judging on a case-by-case basis whether or not there's an argument to take a hearing either to a hybrid where one or two parties attend, or to a fully attended hearing. But certainly for most of the pandemic, most hearings have been conducted remotely. So I shall move on to the next slide. Court proceedings have been looking very different from before the pandemic. For those parties coming to court with a conflict with their former partner in relation to contact with a child, most of those cases are what we call tier 1 cases. So they will be listed in front of magistrates in the family proceedings courts. Now, in most courts, those cases, particularly the first hearing in those cases, have been dealt with by legal advisors to the magistrates rather than the magistrates themselves. And to the extent that there has been any insuperable conflict that can't be resolved by agreement, higher judges have been asked to get involved. But there has been enormous pressure placed on parties to try and reach an agreement, very often over the telephone, a process which has not been easy either for the court or for the parties involved. I add to that, of course, that the pandemic has had just as much of an impact on the ancillary services around the court. So CAFCAS have faced the same problems as everybody else. Most first hearings have taken place with CAFCAS's input being based on their letter that they start at the beginning of proceedings rather than physical attendance. That's something which is not particularly helpful to parents in these circumstances. And the same applies, of course, to social workers in cases where social workers are involved. Most hearings during the pandemic have taken place remotely, and of those hearings, most of them have been conducted by way of the telephone. Particularly at the beginning of the pandemic period, there was a lack of consistency from the courts in terms of what platform should be used. There have been some hearings conducted by way of Zoom. There have been some by way of Skype. There is now an official favouring of the cloud video platform for some hearings. And we have seen since the lockdown began to ease and has been eased more and more, we've seen more and more hybrid hearings. And very often it will be the more vulnerable parent, particularly in care proceedings, who will attend court while other parties dial in remotely. So frankly, it's something of a shifting landscape, and parties who step into it will have to accept the case management decisions of judges as to how these hearings should go ahead. One thing that can be done to try and correct that malady to some extent is to really focus on the written submissions that are put before the court. I say this with some trepidation because, as many practitioners listening in will know, there is frequently a significant delay between parties emailing their documents into the court ahead of a hearing and that document finding its way under the judge's nose. So focusing on the content and the comprehensive content of that document and getting it in early so that the court knows what you as a party or as a practitioner want and why is ever more crucial, even more important than before, in my view. And this goes back to so many of the messages that family law professionals give out, but it's completely true. It is definitely it's in the best interests of children, it's in the best interests of parties to work as hard as they possibly can on communication with the other party, resolving disputes outside of court, making mediation work. And I was certainly really impressed with James's presentation on Our Family Wizard. The alternatives to court proceedings need more than ever to be looked at in great detail and with genuine dedication before any court process is embarked upon. And so moving on to the next slide, there have of course been situations, those that arose during the lockdown period. I'm absolutely sure that they are not at an end, particularly in light of the government's guidance issued overnight. There have been occasions where parties have stopped contact because of COVID. It is not clear, because we don't have a body of case law to tell us. So there is a question mark over how the courts would interpret this. And there's been a good deal of discussion amongst professionals about whether it would be considered in some circumstances to be a sort of force majeure event, which meant that there wasn't a breach of a contact order, or it's a case of the party who thinks there should be no contact arguing that it is a reasonable excuse to stop it. Now, there's an enormous dark question mark hanging over this and no clear answer, but everything that we know about the way that courts have determined Children Act applications and have determined issues during the course of the pandemic is that everything that possibly can be done to keep contact running between a child and that child's parents should be done. The general opinion, if I can put it like that, it leans towards any parent suggesting that contact ought to be either varied or stopped as a result of the pandemic will need to show that that is a reasonable course of action, and the threshold to justifying that is high. The President issued guidance in relation to the question, and the guidance was first issued, I think, on the 24th of March, and then it was updated on the 31st of March. And I've drawn your attention to paragraph 6 of that guidance, which is the really important bit. And it sounds like a poll on Mumsnet, but the question is, are you acting reasonably in what you do? Are you acting reasonably? There will be circumstances, specific circumstances, where the pandemic does impact on arrangements, but the general answer should be that contact continues. Again, it comes back to this question of communication, trying to avoid court proceedings if possible, and doing everything possible to mediate or even arbitrate, but certainly resolve conflicts outside of the court arena if possible. And so moving on, I have come to the end. I think there is an opportunity for questions to be put.
Yes, there are. So thank you very much, Hannah. That was a fantastic run through of how the court are managing or not managing family law matters at the moment. One of the questions that has come in is whether or not it would be reasonable for a parent to withhold holiday contact if it is in a country where there are no real restrictions or quarantine rules, such as Turkey. What are your thoughts on that, Hannah?
I think it would. So, firstly, any suggestion that a child should not be travelling to a particular destination because of the COVID risks in that destination, I would expect, and I think a court would expect that to be matched by a suggestion that they could, of course, spend that time elsewhere. And so that it's not a case of saying you can't have your holiday in a particular destination. You're not having contact at all. I think it would have to be matched by an offer of having that contact either in the UK or elsewhere.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because it does depend on how the court would approach it, because unfortunately, often when we go before judges, it really does depend on who you're before and how they approach it. I think I share your view that I think the holiday, well, I do share your view that the holiday contact should go ahead, nevertheless, but you might need to alter your arrangements to safer, well, what's deemed a safer country. And again, I come back to this, the point I made when I was giving my presentation is how disruptive will it be to the child? If you're going to a country where there are no quarantine rules and then they come back and they've got to quarantine here for 2 weeks, we've had them off school, lots of children, for almost 6 months. Is it in their best interest to basically have what could be a month out of the education system again?
So I think it would certainly be quite a dangerous subject to take to court, in my view, because I think
yes, it would be
different judges. I think some judges might be influenced by the infection rate in the country in particular that you're discussing. So if there was a known high infection rate in a particular jurisdiction, I think that might influence a judge. I don't think that a judge is going to consider it to be in the best interests of a child to have 2 weeks off school in circumstances where most children have been off school from March to September. And so if the air corridor, or whatever it's called, would operate such that that was required, then again, I think that the parent would potentially be looking at taking their holiday in another location.
Okay. Another question that we've had, which is slightly a different subject, so I'm just going to read it out. It's been submitted prior to the seminar. We have a resident parent disputing that the Zoom contact sessions we facilitated during lockdown count towards the planned sessions as stated in the court order. We believe they do count towards the allocated sessions. They were positive contact sessions and a good reintroduction for a parent and child who had not seen each other for several years. The parents are back in court at the end of the month where a judge will decide, but I'd be interested to know what you think. So before I put this out the panel, from my perspective, I think it's really helpful if contact centres can just produce a brief summary. It doesn't have to be a lengthy report, but just to give some idea of how the contact sessions went, because I've had that before in cases and it has actually been very helpful. Further, from my point of view, and this is something I have to remind clients of, I think it's about the quality of time you spend with the child. You know, I can understand why a parent who's been parted from their child for a long period of time wants to get back up and running with face-to-face contact. But actually, if you're putting in place foundations for it to be a really positive relationship and you're building a positive foundation with that child, I believe that's in the child's best interest. So it might not be exactly what that parent wants, but if the child is enjoying it and it's actually helping to build that relationship, that can only be positive. My view, therefore, is that I think that the Zoom contact sessions would count because we're unprecedented times, and I think we have to look at the quality of the time that the children have been spending with that other parent. What are your thoughts on the panel?
I agree with that. I think it would be case by case, in my view, because contact centres can be used for reintroduction for a number of different reasons. There might be a number of different risks present. They may or may not be ameliorated by the use of Zoom for reintroduction. But subject to that, and the question does say that the matter is going to come before a judge, so that will be, that will be subject to his or her analysis. If the sessions are positive, the point of reintroduction is reintroduction, and it seems to me most likely that they would be considered sufficient to move on to the next stage.
You know, with some reintroduction, we're dealing with parents just writing to the other child. So the fact that you have the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting is a gentle way of reintroducing somebody before physically reintroducing them. And I'd be interested to see how Zoom might be used or FaceTime might be used moving forward following the pandemic. Okay, moving on, we've had another question from the contact centre, child contact centre, saying, we are not currently open but are in the process of opening. However, would like to know the rules regarding social distancing between the non-resident parent and child, and also about if a parent is visiting from an area of higher risk. Does this affect the contacts in any way? Well, certainly parents spending time with their children, let's say they're all within the UK, physical contact can continue on, so you can give them a hug and a kiss and, you know, help make their dinner and things like that. What are your thoughts, Hannah, about if a parent is coming from a higher risk country? I've already talked about them having to follow quarantine measures. Yeah.
Are we talking about sorry, was the question the non-resident parent coming from a higher risk country or a higher risk part of this country? So
no, higher risk country, so I'm presuming abroad.
Right, okay. I mean, I think the individual needs to comply with whatever regulations are in place. So if the party is travelling from another jurisdiction in order to have contact in a contact centre in the UK, that should be subject to the quarantine rules. I think it's most likely to come up, in fact, if you've got a non-resident parent living in an area of this country which is subject to a local lockdown. So we've got a number of places. I think one of the most recently added to the list was Bolton. Yes. We're testing my BBC News knowledge now. But for example, if you had let's say, for the sake of argument, a mother who had to travel down to Surrey from there, if that constitutes a breach of the local lockdown, then I don't think that should be happening. I think alternatives should be sought in those circumstances, either another venue or, in extremis, a remote meeting of some sort.
Okay, so the view is follow the lockdown and the quarantine rules. Sorry, James, what were you going to say?
No. So I was just going to say, it's interesting that something that we get asked quite a lot at our Family Wizard at the moment is, can we sort of do a tracking system within our Family Wizard? If you've got one parent, because of course we're quite international, coming in saying, okay, I landed on this day, I saw the child on this day, has it been 14 days? So it's something we get asked quite a lot as well. And, we've got those features to comply with that and using the check-in feature. So I think first and foremost, as Hannah said, those families have to comply with the guidelines. But if they are getting creative with them, then I think the next step would be keeping an accurate tracking record of every step they do along the way, so that everyone can prioritize health of the family, and then whatever the case stipulates to.
It's interesting, our Family Wizard, because I've seen that having looked at your presentation, is quite extensive, and I can see that it's something that's evolved from when I was first introduced to it. I mean, do you take feedback from practitioners, users, to see if there's anything that can improve? Because you don't want to make it too draconian, but by the same token, you do want to make sure that it supports contact. Oh,
absolutely. The program was built to help children. That is exactly, the child is at the heart. That's how I got into it. I was a teacher for 5 years before I did this. We want to find ways to help. So we are living in the clouds thinking we've solved the problem, but we want to help. So if we come here and you say, okay, well, this has happened now, your app needs to help us to do this, please tell us, because we want to help, and that's exactly what we're here to do. So yeah, always feedback is welcome, and we're trying to adapt, as I'm sure everyone is with lockdown, and find ways to be inventive and be innovative. So yeah, any feedback welcome, and hopefully we can keep moving forward.
Lovely. James, as I've suggested before, I think we need a tone meter for some solicitors and family practitioners, but that's for another day. Anyway, that concludes the webinar today. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank you for joining us, and to thank you to my speakers, Hannah McSorley of Guildford Chambers and James Evans of Our Family Wizard. Just to remind you that there is a recording of this webinar that will go onto our website following this seminar today, together with a copy of all the slides. Further, there are 2 more webinars coming up. So the next one is about domestic abuse and the effect of the pandemic. I will give a brief introduction as to what remedies can be available to victims in terms of civil, as in family law court options. We'll have Surrey Police there explaining the options and the support that they can provide, and your sanctuary providing information as the support that they can provide. The final webinar in our family law series with DMH Stallard is regarding financial matters, and we will have Ben Fernley of 29 Bedford Row. He's a family barrister and deputy district judge joining us, and also Caroline Bayliss of Excalibur Actuaries, and she will be explaining the impact of the pandemic upon how we resolve financial matters. So, for example, business valuations, maintenance, and pension shares, and so forth. So please do sign up for them. They are, as I say, aimed not only at practitioners, but also anybody that these issues might affect. So again, I thank you on behalf of DMH Stallard for joining us today, and I hope that you found the webinar useful. Bye-bye now.